There you go.
Well, thank you everybody for being here. Can't wait to go ahead with the program.
All right, great, thank you. Well, I'm going to kick it off first to Eric Lashinsky, who is the city's new Chief of Comprehensive Planning. He's been with the city not too long, about a month or so, month and change, and we're very excited to have him here. And he's going to give you a little bit more information about tonight. So Eric, over to you.
Thanks, Ellie. Jason, why don't you go ahead and flip to the next slide? So I am just a few weeks into this position here. This event was already in the works when I joined. I just kind of got on the train, but really glad to be with you. Thanks for everyone for joining tonight. I think we had over 80 responses to this. So I think we're batting over 500 tonight. And you know, I would. It goes without saying, I'd rather be in the same room with you all, hovering over a map and pointing at things and talking with you in person. This is the format that we have to work with during these extraordinary times. And I spent a lot of my job thinking about other ways of engaging with the community, even during this pandemic. And I think we're going to see how this goes, and have other opportunities to participate in the comprehensive plan moving forward. But real brief, you know, for those of you who may not be familiar with the comprehensive plan, I'm the Chief of Comprehensive Planning, which means, in other words, it's sort of a long-range planning role within the city. I'm not the person who looks at site-specific developments, but I'm looking at sensible policy directions for the city in the long run. And the comprehensive plan is one of the best tools we have to lay out those policies. We do it every 10 years. The state of Maryland requires it of us, and it's a tool that most cities that are successful have been using to their advantage to make sure everybody's on the same page with what the priorities are for that city moving forward. And it really sets our course for the next 10, 20, even 30 years moving forward. What you're looking at on the screen here is our dedicated website for the comprehensive plan that's on the city's website, on the Planning and Zoning Department website. I encourage you all to check it out. It's more than just a video from Mayor Buckley, although that is a good introduction to the comprehensive plan. You can find a whole range of links to things that have already happened when this, in the last year that this plan has been underway. On that left sidebar in the green box, you can see there's a link for the West Annapolis plan. That is a dedicated page specifically for the West Annapolis master plan, which is why we're here tonight. On that page, we're gonna put a recording of tonight's presentation and another way of accessing the survey that we're going to be doing later. So if anybody knows folks who couldn't join tonight and want to participate, please encourage them to visit that webpage in the coming days, and they can participate that way. You may be wondering why are we focusing on West Annapolis within this comprehensive plan, which is a citywide vision, and the reasons are a few. I don't need to tell everyone on this call that West Annapolis is a pretty extraordinary part of Annapolis in the way that it's extremely family-friendly, walkable, almost urban village type place. Very few parts of Annapolis can say that they have a main street in your Annapolis street, a dedicated commercial area, a grocery store in walking distance, and it's a great place to live. We know that. We are anticipating changes in coming decade as buildings change and people want other things to come into the neighborhood, and we're trying to get ahead of that in a way with this process and try to understand what what folks who live in West Annapolis and other people in the city are interested in seeing. We also think that what we learned from this process could help us understand how to address other parts of Annapolis that may be changing in the next 10 or so years. So that's a little bit of an introduction. If you can go to the next slide. This sort of confusing series of circles and lines is a couple schedules. I wanted just to show you where we are, in this process. So the West Annapolis Master Plan we're seeing as approximately 5-month planning process. It's going to move through a series of workshops. We're going to see how this one goes tonight, and we'll improve if we need to. We have another workshop coming up in October where our planning team will introduce in a minute. We'll share some of their initial concepts and thoughts on how we might look at the commercial area of West Annapolis changing. Ultimately, they're going to work on a draft master plan that we would be sharing with you all sometime around Christmas, and work towards a final plan following receiving comments from folks. We'll make updates as needed, and then integrate a final plan into this larger comprehensive plan that's working almost in parallel. And so that's the schedule at the top. You can see we've been underway for a while. We're still sort of looking at existing conditions, how the city's changed since the last comprehensive plan in 2009. We're about to turn the corner on that, however, and move into specific goals, performance metrics, strategies that we'll be able to share with you. I expect sometime in October, and then move into kind of a formal plan documentation during the holiday season. And in early mid-January, I expect we'd have a draft comprehensive plan document to share for public review, and move towards a final comp plan in the spring that would be presented to City Council ultimately, and adopted once we've made all the changes we need to make, and all the voices have been heard. And so that's just in brief where we are with things. If you haven't participated yet in the comprehensive plan, I hope you can stay plugged in. And just the last thing I'll say before I introduce the planning team is that we have a couple other tools that we're going to release soon for getting your input. One is a transportation focused survey that's a citywide, should be very straightforward, but important to us, as transportation mobility is a key part of the comprehensive planning process. And then another one that's focused on redevelopment. And that one is going to address a lot of what we're talking about tonight in terms of the kind of development we'd like to see in Annapolis, although it's not going to necessarily be specific to a particular part of the city. We're actually asking you for thoughts on where some of this redevelopment might happen. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to Jason from Stantec, our planning consultant on this project. I'll just say that Stantec is an award-winning firm that's worked all over the country and brings an incredible amount of expertise from working in other places that are going through similar challenges to ours, and that's partly why they're involved. And I've enjoyed working with them so far. And they are going to walk us through the agenda for tonight and explain how participation is going to work in this so-called virtual workshop. So,
all right.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Eric. Everybody hear me all right? So I'm Jason Besky. I will be working with, you can see our images here, David Dixon, and I will be covering most of the presentation and discussion this evening. We also have Jess Alexander on the call. Jess and I are both located in the DC area, and David is in the Boston area. But I want to say this is the type of project we all get very excited about working on. A small neighborhood scale, one where, you know, from my conversations with the neighborhood association board so far, there seems to be a lot of passion and excitement behind what can happen in the future of West Annapolis. So we hope to tap into that excitement and work with you closely to create the future of West Annapolis. So for this evening's agenda, after I go through the agenda, I will cover kind of the run of how things work on Teams. If you're not familiar, this should help you because we will be doing some polling tonight. We're going to start out by doing a couple presentations. David will talk about setting the stage and the new normal. What are the demographic trends and the economic trends behind how neighborhoods are evolving throughout the country? I'm going to do a presentation on placemaking, and that's kind of talking about the physical framework of development behind transportation, parks, and buildings. And along the way, after that, we will go through a series of polling questions. So we're going to ask you to participate in these polls, and then we'll talk through what everybody's saying. We'll be able to show the instant results of what the polls are showing. So let's talk through that. We want to hear your input. One thing, and we will have a couple sessions of questions and answers. We have one session outlined after each presentation. I think what we might do this evening is have David and I work through both of our presentations and take question and answer after that. That might be a little easier if we do it that way. So what I'm gonna do is pull my my Teams window into the screen just to run through a couple logistics. There's everybody hanging out. So if you're not familiar, there are these functions you will see in Teams. I'm gonna guess I have a newer version, so if you look probably down towards the bottom, you will see these symbols. This symbol shows all the participants. Looks like we have 67 people on this call right now. And what I'm going to try to do is we're going to field questions throughout this. We will have a Q&A session, but the way we're going to try to do it this evening is asking you, if you open, you can see the word bubble here, which again is probably towards the bottom. This is where you're going to click on it and you're going to be able to put a message down on the bottom right as you see. Eric is going to field and moderate the questions this evening, if you have any. We will have an opportunity to, however, if we can't get to your question for some reason, we want to collect all the questions and provide answers. So if you put a question in the chat box throughout and we're unable to get to it, please hold tight and we will put together a matrix addressing all the questions that we've received this evening. And we will, I'm guessing Eric will put those on the West Annapolis dedicated webpage.
Yes.
So as part of these types of processes, I think it's really important that people hear each other and that it's very transparent so we can collectively gain all of this input into what we're doing. I'm gonna go ahead and mute everyone real quick. I'm getting okay. The next piece I want to show you is in the chat box. What I will be doing in the chat box, so you may want to have this chat box open while we go through this, is putting together I'll put a series of links in here one at a time. These links you will click on and that will pull up a separate page where you can take the poll. And you know what, why don't we just go ahead and do that right now. I'm gonna take the first poll and I'll show you what this looks like in our forms. You can see this page here. We're going to be taking polls around all of these areas. This is kind of that placemaking framework I was talking about. But we're going to start out and we're going to have a series of questions. We kind of want to hear where you're from and you know, where do you live, where do you work, and a few other questions. When I post this, let's give it a minute or two for everybody to be able to enter their responses. I don't believe we have more than 5 questions in each area, so this should go pretty quick. We'll give it about a minute. As you're taking the polling questions, I'm going to click on, I'll have this screen up, and we'll real time be able to see the inputs coming in. Your inputs are anonymous, but what it will do is give David and I a sense, and Jess, throughout the workshop, of what your inputs are into this. Again, I want to reiterate, if you have inputs and questions, please do follow up with us about those if we are unable to get to those.
Are we supposed to do something here?
Not yet. Not yet. I'll let you know when I put a link in the chat box that you can click on. It'll just be in a minute here. I do want to let everybody know that we are recording it this evening. I think Eric mentioned that, but we're going to post that later on the West Annapolis page. And I also want to say, when this meeting is over this evening, whether you're calling in or if you're online on Teams, we ask that you X out of the Teams application so that the recording doesn't carry on. So I'll stick around a little while afterwards to make sure it's closed out completely and that we end the recording at that time. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to look at this first question, or these first questions, and we can talk through them as we're doing this. But I'm going to go ahead and put this link into the chat box. Does everybody see a link in that chat box? So if you would, go ahead and click on that link, and it will pull up this poll. First one starting with COVID-19 and whether or not that's had impact on you as far as your family or your business. So I will pull up this page, and once people start answering the polls and finishing those up, we will see the results here.
Where's the chat box?
Let me pull this over real quick. 1 second. I'll show you on the screen. You will have a button. Yours may not be up top, but it's a SoundCloud, a word cloud that looks like this. Yours is probably, if you're online version, your bar will be at the bottom. Is someone
Got it?
Did someone share?
Where are we?
Someone.
Where are we clicking at?
Do you see the bubbles below?
Or if you haven't accessed the survey yet, you need to click on the link in the chat box that Jason posted just a moment ago, and that will take you to the survey questions.
Okay, not doing well here. Okay, is this the one that says meeting chat on the far right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay,
There's a link.
you just kind of have to help us, tell us where on the screen to be looking, because there's so much on the screen.
This is our chat box. And if you click on this link right here.
Click on that.
What link?
Do you see my chat box?
Yeah, okay.
And if you scroll all the way to the bottom,
So if I click on this, it will pull up the survey like this.
Not working for me. No idea.
I mean, you need to be more helpful here. I mean,
Okay,
there's a link in the Meet chat. I mean,
Yeah.
drive people there. I mean, if you want to have results that are meaningful, you need to help people get to the right place.
okay. So are you able to click on this link?
Yeah, nothing happens when I do.
Let me try again. I'm going to put a fresh link in here
Okay.
and send it. Please click on that link.
Yeah, I get a picture of you and me.
Okay.
It should open up a new window if it's working correctly for you.
So, Jason, one thing that's important is for people not to try and click on your link,
Right.
but over in their own
In your own chat box. Yes.
Yes.
I'm looking at the agenda. That's not
Okay.
really helpful.
I suggest you be very literal in describing where on the screen we should go and what we should do.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Let me start this over. Okay. The chat box. Okay. If you are unable to open a meeting chat box, there is a SoundCloud image that looks like, or a sound bubble image that looks like this. It may be across the bottom of your screen where I'm running my cursor. If you click on that, that opens and hides the chat, the meeting chat.
Okay. Got
Which-
that.
Okay.
On your screen, it will be a white box that goes from the top to the bottom of your screen and says meeting chat.
That's how you
Look.
found it.
You
Okay.
have to go to chat,
And
high
then-
conversation,
Where is
show,
that? Where's that?
high conversation.
Nope.
All right.
I got it. We did up in
I
the
can't-
right-hand corner at the top, there was a one, a red one, and we clicked on that, and then we clicked on the link, and there it was. So look at the
Alright.
right hand at the top.
Yeah, I don't have a red one.
It's not the same, I guess, for everybody,
And
but
unfortunately, everybody's is going to be different depending on what kind of computer they're using and software on that computer.
That's right. So everyone, I just want to remind you, we are going to be sending this out separately later on. So if you don't have a chance to log on right now, you will have a chance later on to do it in a different format that'll be a little bit easier if you're not familiar with Microsoft Teams, which most of you aren't. So if you can't get on tonight, don't worry. There's going to be other opportunities to do so.
But you know, it's there. I keep clicking on it and nothing happens.
Are you clicking on my screen? Trying to click on my screen?
Clicking where you keep putting the pointer?
Right. That's my screen. Do you have your own? Does it pull up your own browser window when you click on the link?
No.
Yeah.
One thing I'll just share is if you, so mine is showing all the way to the right of my screen. There's a white column that says meeting chat at the top of it. And it has a list of who's come in and left the meeting. So if you're not seeing a list of names alongside your screen, then you probably do not have your chat box open.
In a
No,
white
I'm
box.
seeing all that.
And what you may need to do is scroll down past that list of names all the way to the bottom of your meeting chat box.
For most of you, turning on your meeting chat box is going to be at the, as Jason has said, it's going to be on a little bar towards the bottom of your screen. It's going to be in a white column rather than black that you're seeing.
No, mine's black.
Yeah.
I don't have
Okay.
any white column.
Okay. Do you have a meeting chat box?
I have.
It's like a thought bubble, like a, you know, like a, what a cartoon message would be in. It's that
probably
little
going to be
icon.
the one where your hand is. Look to the right of the hand.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You see that square?
it's got green on the bottom.
Yeah, it's got an F in the middle.
Yes.
Right
Yeah,
above that. Just click
I
on
keep
that.
hitting that. Right above it, I keep hitting, and
And it's not going anywhere?
It's
I
not
see
opening
myself and I see you.
Okay, so
Picture pops up.
now do you see a meeting chat box?
Nope. I
Okay,
see the
so
agenda.
I think you were trying to click on my chat, on my meeting chat box.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you look at the bottom of your screen where your web browser is,
You're always that way. You're always Mr. I don't want to be.
Okay, I'm still looking at workshop agenda.
Okay,
Yes, and I know, and in the end, you are.
go to the
Look to
bottom
the
of the
far
screen.
right, look to the far right of your screen where it says meeting chat, and you'll see people's names, an AR, a E, a JB for Besky, Jason Guest. Do you see that square?
Yeah, not on workshop agenda.
No, go to the far right. It's not on there. It's going to be on the far right of your screen.
Far right of my screen is the end of the agenda.
Yeah, so Fred, you do not have your meeting chat open.
This is the wrong page.
So Fred, you have a bar across the bottom of your screen that has, like, the first thing is a red dot, and then it says, it has.
Okay.
No, I don't. I'm looking at responses right now.
Yeah, so we've gotten 52 responses so far.
Okay, we should probably just move on and
Okay, let's do that.
yeah, because people's chat box.
You could also share your screen.
Yeah, we can.
People that are having problems, you can share your screen.
I can what?
Look, why don't we try to move on and look at, we have good representation for those who are on. Let's, as Eric mentioned, we will be able to post this later on the website, and you will still be able to take this poll, and we'll continue to gain inputs as we move forward. So I just want to look at this real quick. As we have shown here, I want to look at this first question. And has COVID-19 impacted your business or your and what we're seeing for the greatest answer is the pandemic has had a moderate effect on me. People mostly are from West Annapolis, Wardour. We have 8 people on that are in Annapolis, outside of West Annapolis. And then we have 2 people on that are outside of Annapolis altogether. Work, we're pretty evenly split. Actually, I'm a little surprised to see that many people that actually work in West Annapolis. Very cool. The average commute is 0 to 10 minutes, and we could have qualified that a little bit, but I'm assuming people during the pandemic have a lot less of a commute. I know I walk to my office in the house, and that's that. And the average size household, the greatest response was 2 people in a household. We do have 8 people that have 5+. So a pretty interesting distribution. I think these statistics, as David presents here in a little bit, will kind of match up with what we're seeing as greater trends throughout the country.
Well, can I just say something here? This really is skewed by the fact that, you're not asking the right question. You should ask people if they do have a commute, because if they do not, which is most likely a big part of this population, well, then it looks that way. But I tell you, most of those people here that says that they have a short commute is because they don't have any.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. I'm going to ask that if there are questions or comments that you please put them in the meeting chat, or we can call on people during the Q&A just so we can keep flowing. This won't be a perfect survey. What we wanted to gain from this particular one is just a quick understanding, high-level understanding of who's on the call and who may be in West Annapolis. So why don't we do this? I'm going to go ahead and have us jump into our presentations and have David present. If you would please wait till afterwards. Again, you can put questions in the meeting chat along the way, and Eric from the city will be moderating that as we get to the Q&A session. And I think moving forward, looks like people, we struggle a little bit on this one. We'll try to get it on the next polling question, but looks like a fair majority of those that are on the call were able to participate in the poll. So with that, I'm going to hand this over to David Dixon, who's going to talk to us about the new normal. David,
okay, thanks, Jason. And I take it you'll advance the slides?
Absolutely.
Okay, so hello, everybody. It's a real pleasure and honor to have the chance to talk to you. I'm David Dixon. I'm Stantec's Urban Places Fellow, which probably just means I've been around longer than everybody else. I started life as an architect and loved to design great places and fell in love with main streets. And then I realized that in order to design great places, I really had to understand what the foundational factors were that were setting the stage. What was shaping market demand? How was our economy working? How was technology affecting the kinds of cities we could create and places we could create? And so I became much more interested in the foundational issues. And that's what I'm going to talk about for the next probably 10, 15, 20 minutes. Blessedly, I will ask you no questions, so we won't have to worry about that. But really look forward to the questions from the chat box, or if you can't get in the chat box, just ask when I'm done. And if something is really not making sense, just go ahead and ask while I'm presenting. So we did a plan for a new town center just outside of Roanoke, and somebody in the audience raised his hand and said, "Oh, I get what you're talking about. America is a suburban continent that now has an urban population." Next. So what looked like a whole lot of fun in 1955, next please, is a little less fun for a lot of folks today. Next. I want to just speak for a second about what the impact of COVID-19 is likely to be and is not likely to be on the things that we're talking about here. And I'm actually going to focus more on the is not. I'm going to be talking a lot about fundamental demographic trends. A lot of you are in two-person households. That is going to be the large majority of our population growth and growth in households in the next 20 years. COVID is not changing that, and that really shapes where people want to live. COVID is not changing the fact that it is our knowledge economy that is creating almost all of the new jobs we have, and frankly, ultimately responsible for the new tax revenue we collect. And COVID is not changing the fact, if anything, it's accelerating the fact that the internet and other things are undermining drive to retail, but boy, walkable retail is likely to come back very strong, and you have a wonderful Main Street. You're in many ways very well positioned. So probably the big message here is that we are in the middle of something that is very unsettling and having tragic consequences for many folks. One of the things that is worth noting is that COVID actually does not correlate with density, but with poverty. It is not an unequal, it is a very unequal pandemic. But the fundamental forces that were shaping our future 6 months ago are still, and creating the opportunities that West Annapolis will have are still in place. Next, please. Next, yeah. So just next. Imitation cities, imitation downtowns, or next. This is a lifestyle center outside of Columbus, Ohio, which was very successful for a while, but no longer. Imitation cute colonial streets are not the new norm. Next, please. What the new norm is really, more than anything, will be supporting much more robustly in many ways, is the kind of place that West Annapolis is, and I'd love to know more about what you aspire to be. It is probably downtowns, until you pick up on Eric's term, urban villages, and the urban neighborhoods around downtowns are probably the places that will most benefit from the changes I'm going to talk about. And when I say benefit, it means create opportunities. Doesn't mean you have to seize those opportunities, but it's creating opportunities, and probably more opportunity than, for instance, West Annapolis has had in terms of attracting people to live, work, invest, innovate at any point in the last 50 or 60 years. So next, please. And it starts with the fact that for many years after World War II, as you all know, dollars, our economy flowed out to suburbs. This at one point looked like the future. It definitely isn't today. We did a lot of work in Dublin, Ohio, very affluent suburb outside of Columbus. And most of you are too young to recognize Alfred E. Newman, but he was the coolest thing around when I was a kid. It's what me worry. It is actually suburbs today that need to worry. It is great urban villages like West Annapolis that have the future moving toward them. Next, please. And this is actually Dublin, Ohio's, which we help plan, new Main Street, new downtown, and a new heart for that suburban community that you already have. Next, please. So next, it really starts with what's happening to our demographics. Next. So when I was a kid, this is what I turned on a television. None of you probably know who these folks are, but it starts on the left with Leave It to Beaver and his older brother. But families had only one of the people who worked was actually paid. Everybody was smiling, and there were lots of kids. Flash, next, please. Turn on media today, and we look much more diverse, very different. And one of the things I'm going to talk about is there are far fewer kids on the horizon. That's not an anti-kid statement. I've got 2 of them and 2 grandchildren that go with them. But it is very important to understand how the 2-person households that represent so much of West Annapolis are increasingly going to be the norm. Next, please. So if you went back, if you look forward recently as 1990 to 2010, most of our population growth was 35 to 65-year-olds. This actually goes right back to probably 1950 or 60, this trend. Starting around around 2010, a little bit before, our population growth began to change dramatically. More than half of US population growth for the next 20 years, and this is probably at least 30 years, will be folks over 65. These are not the folks who go out in the suburbs and buy single family houses, but boy, do they love to live near walkable main streets. Next, please. If you look at this chart, I guess the years got eliminated, but the first bar would have been about 1990, then 2000, then 2025. You will notice the green piece of this bar is adults, singles, and couples. This is 1 or 2-person households. They will represent basically more than 60% of all households by the late 2020s, by around 2030. They will also represent 80+% of the net growth in households, and it is net growth in households that create our housing market. So basically, for the next 20 years, as this green bar, piece of bar grows bigger and bigger, the orange is 2 parents with kids. You will realize that it's a really shock to me too every time I look at this data, but 2 households with 2 parents and kids, who are the single demographic that most prefers a freestanding single family house in a suburb, will represent about 10% of all households. So now let's go to the right side. I'm sorry, back just 1 minute. Right now, 62% of all US housing stock is single family detached, most of this in suburbs. So what we have is a housing market looking for very different kinds of housing than most of our housing actually represents. So we are way undersupplied with a large variety of housing types that adults and singles, 1 and 2-person households without kids strongly prefer. And more than anything else, these are, whether it's an apartment or a townhouse or even a single family house, maybe on a small lot, they're within walking distance of a main street and a supermarket and some of the things that Eric talked about that bless your wonderful neighborhood today. Next, please. Not only that, it turns out, if you look in the left, that this chart basically shows where the top 10%, the top 20%, top 30, top 40%, where this is household income by decile. So the top bar, light brown or tan, is the top 10% in terms of income. Then the second 10%, the second 10%, the third 10%. Big picture, the more affluent households are, and this goes back to about 2000, the more likely they are to be moving into a place like West Annapolis or a downtown or a lively urban neighborhood, but out of a suburb. poverty is actually moving at a very fast pace from cities to outer suburbs today. And more affluent households are moving in, and not all the way in. Many of them would love to be in a wonderful walkable neighborhood like West Annapolis. Not only that, the more educated folks are, particularly 26 to 49-year-olds, the more likely they are to be moving into urban core, would include West Annapolis, sort of the center, the walkable center of places, while folks with less than 4 years of college tend to be moving out. And that is going to be very important in a minute. So next, please. Yeah. So here we are at that minute. So we have an opportunity for walkable urban villages that we haven't had in my professional lifetime. And believe me, it's a long professional lifetime. We also have an imperative, a reason to really pay attention to this. Next, please. So, surprise, surprise, when people have fewer kids, our workforce grows a lot more slowly. So the US workforce is growing now at less than half the pace it did as recently as 2012. Even in 2040, will still grow more slowly than it did in 2010. At the same time, next please, the nature of our job market is changing so that a large majority of net new jobs of our job growth is in knowledge industries, innovation, basically consider 70, 80, 90, depends on where you are, but at least 70, sometimes 90% of net new jobs require at least some college education today. Workforce growing much more slowly, jobs all concentrating among those with more education. We have a real shortage of knowledge workers, of the workers, the talent that now jobs and investment follow. So if you want your community to have a good tax base, to more importantly, probably than that, to offer jobs to folks without having to drive for 40 minutes. I love whether you are working at home, retired, or have a job, the fact that many of you have relatively short commutes. That's a luxury that communities that can attract the kinds of jobs that are being created today have, and those are the communities that tend to be better educated and as a result more affluent, and they tend to be closer in today. This is an article I just loved in the Wall Street Journal just about I think it was like about a month ago, just pointing out how technology companies are leaving their suburban office parks and trying to find any place in an urban walkable place, but that's also West Annapolis, to relocate. What this means is that if you look at the growth in rents of urban jobs, urban offices, et cetera, versus suburban, urban rents have been rising 8 times as fast since 2000. This is 2000 to present. And believe me, if you want to pay for great parks and great schools and great services, being at the upper end, on the upper curve rather than the bottom curve, is a real advantage. Next, please. So then we come to a series of trends that are really disrupting life as we've known it. That doesn't mean that they're diminishing life. They're just creating a different set of opportunities. So as you probably all heard, Amazon is literally eating the lunch of many retailers. COVID has very much accelerated this process. But long story short, if you look at the chart here, you will notice at the bottom of the list is food and beverages. That line is flat. What that is saying is that online retail sales are not competing with food and beverages. Basically, you could extend that to experiential retail. Big message here is that retail that you have to drive to is in real trouble. All retail is in trouble right now, but we're going to come out of this pandemic. Retail that people can walk to is doing quite well. More than 50% of all retail leases last year were actually for restaurants or cool coffee places or maybe breweries. Beer, coffee, and food are definitely doing well. For other experiential retail, And it is the kinds of places that can attract that housing market, cool, walkable, characterful places that will build the market that can support retail in the future. And retail and walkability go hand in hand. So I'd say West Annapolis is much better positioned than most of suburban Maryland to become more walkable, more amenitized, have more retail, as retail is basically retreating from for much more suburban locations. And there are other factors here too, and I can answer questions if people have those, but this is the headline. Next, please. And then this cute little fellow is about a trend that you've probably all heard about. It's not going to happen tomorrow, called autonomous mobility. But what it is the headline for a much broader array of changes in how we move around in mobility. And at some point in the next 10, 12, 13, 14 years, a majority of folks on this call, majority of folks on the road in America will have enough connected technology in their cars, meaning their cars can talk to other cars and can talk to parking spaces, that basically our cars, for example, will park themselves. When they park themselves, they're going to park themselves much more compactly. So every parking garage, every surface parking lot will be able to hold 15, 20, 25% more cars than it does today. Then we will move into the era of autonomous mobility in 15 to 20 years from now, certainly within 20 years. And these cars will probably not park anywhere near where we want to go. They'll park in places that we don't care about. And actually, most of us will probably be taking shared autonomous mobility. Next, please. Next, please. Sorry. So this isn't the future. It gets advertised as the future. This is a wonderful Tesla. It's a great joy, I guess, if you can afford one. But next, it is shared autonomous mobility, shared mobility. Lyft and Uber, lots of other technologies that are being developed. We are actually working now with clients to implement slow moving, automated, meaning there's no driver, shuttles that can operate in mixed traffic, and much less expensively, because this is a real problem for people who get paid to drive. You don't have to pay a driver, but that means a lot less expensively than operating a bus, for example. You can run one of these up and down. Sorry, I got knocked off there for a minute. You can run one of these up and down a main street, for example. Not tomorrow, but not that far off. Next, please. Can you hear me? Oops. Next. Yeah, okay.
We can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. All right. So with this in mind, what are some of the factors that really make a difference? And frankly, the communities that are able to take advantage of these changes, treat them as opportunities, are communities with leadership where somebody steps forward to have the community conversation, because this has to be something all of you want, any of the things that I've talked about, or how we shape these. This is a community called Sandy Springs, Georgia, where we created a new suburban downtown. I will just say this is a purple conversation, because those two people are probably the two most politically conservative people I've ever met. And they decided they wanted to lead their suburban community toward creating a new heart, a new downtown, and they did. Next, please. Then it's about compact critical mass. Most folks just don't walk more than 5 minutes. Once again, the retail of the future is shaped by folks who can walk there. That means we want lots of folks living near walkable main streets and near where we want to have life and vitality, not just spread out. Next, please. This starts with getting density right. That doesn't mean a lot of density, but it's thinking about, well, how much activity we want. Therefore, if most folks are going to be walking to get there, and if that's what creates the most value, what kind of density will give us the kind of level of activity we want? And that's a choice that people can make, particularly in a neighborhood like yours. Next, please. It's about transformative planning. And by that, I mean using the kinds of forces I've talked about to shape the kind of place you want to be. This is a big it's called a big box, power box or whatever it is, mall, Best Buy, etc. That is slowly withering. It's outside of Boston. Next, please. Literally, a new urban neighborhood is being created as the parking required by that mall, that power mall, shrinks. That blacktop is being turned into new walkable urban neighborhood. These are the kinds of things that you can do. And believe me, this is creating a lot more value than that mall did at this point. And housing quite a diverse group of folks. Next, please. And finally, it's authenticity. Anybody can come along with $1 billion and outmarket anybody else if somebody else is not authentic, does not create a place that for it. It's not about looking like Annapolis is supposed to look, as much as it is, I think, expressing the living culture of your neighborhood. To the left, this is part of this fellow doing a wheelie or whatever, part of a new 9 million square foot, coolest new piece of Tampa, Florida that we worked on. I think the most important part of it is this place here called Maker's Alley, which is where artists, makers, chefs, folks who make music. I've been told I've been bumped off. I don't know if you can hear me or not. I was just bumped off. Okay, great, thanks. On the left is a parking garage, and somebody started to build on one side of the parking garage is a really cool new walkable new retail environment. On the other side, there were a bunch of surface parking lots. Somebody started developing housing there. Suddenly this parking garage, instead of facing a parking lot, faced a bunch of housing. And what they did was simply take the first floor.
Now we can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay. There's an artist walk that brings 25,000 folks to come and eat at all the restaurants nearby once a week. These artists, believe me, don't pay any rent, but boy, are they a good investment because it is something special.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, and next, please. And this is, we're doing some work in downtown Memphis. Memphis is a very diverse community. And I think one of the things that, and boy, his recent history brought this home to us all the more, tapping into all of our diversity really pays off, frankly, in creating a richness that adds value in many ways. I don't know if you heard me or not. Tapping into diversity. Okay, got it. Thanks. All right. So these are the comments I wanted to make. Jason, I don't know if we have time for questions now, or you want to jump right into the next part.
I think let's go ahead and move into Jason's piece, just given the time frame. Lots of good conversation on the chat. I would say folks who have specific questions, make sure to phrase it that way so we can try to get to those. And we're gonna put this whole conversation from the chat on our website. I think it's interesting. I think we're trying to run a transparent process here. So the last thing I just want to say before Jason moves into his piece, that we were a little remiss in the beginning to clarify, and Rebecca clarified in the meeting chat. We're talking here about the current commercial area of West Annapolis, from Annapolis Street to Rao and Monterey to Taylor. So
let me show that real quick.
Oh, sure.
So
that, but
as we look northwest here, we're looking primarily at, if you can see the cursor on my screen, this 6-block area here. That is the commercial area. I'll talk about the land uses here in a bit when I get into placemaking, but our task is not to look at the single-family neighborhoods at all. David and I like to say we do our master planning without touching a single blade of grass on your single-family home. It's about creating a neighborhood, a complete neighborhood for your community. And what do we want the future of these 6 blocks essentially to look like in order to provide amenity that David was talking about, and a few of the things that I'll be talking about.
And the other point David wanted to make is this is about giving you choices. There's nothing inevitable here.
Yeah, and I'm going to also say that we have no predetermined stance at all with what happens here. This is your neighborhood. We are here to collect your inputs and provide recommendations from what we hear. So, and then give those to the city for incorporation in the comprehensive plan. So what we are looking at doing here is providing recommendations that will grow out of the input that you provide us. That's why it's important that you're here this evening, that you continue to contribute at the webpage dedicated to this initiative, and stay involved as we come back in a couple months with some additional input that we're looking for.
Yeah, Jason and Eric, this is Alex Klein. Can I just make one quick comment here on the bigger picture and one of the reasons that we're here?
Sure.
So, you know, part of what prompted this whole exercise is, as everybody knows, there is new development happening in this part of West Annapolis. You know, as you've seen what's happening at 106, 108, and then the other things around where Morgan Gerard is. So there's a lot of things happening, and basically it's all sort of happening piecemeal. So as parcels become available, they're purchased, somebody wants to redevelop them, they're all done based on what our current zoning and regulations are, and it's frankly it's a bit piecemeal. So this prompted the idea to get together with the city to come up with a more sort of comprehensive view of what do we want to have happen here? What do we want it to look like? And, you know, at the risk of making kind of introducing some jargon here, but the thing that was kicked around was the idea of form-based codes, which make things predictable from a visual standpoint, just to boil it down really simply. But I just want to make those comments. That's a lot of what the motivation for doing this is, because things are happening and they're happening piecemeal. And do we just want to let it happen that way, or do we want to bring, you know, a more comprehensive structure to it?
All right. Thank you, Alex.
You bet.
Well said.
Okay. So let me get through this next piece real quick. And what this will do is kind of give you an idea of the elements that we are looking at when we look at West Annapolis, when we come back with our recommendations. So my piece is on placemaking, and what that really refers to are three main components. We have started to do analysis of the streets or circulation, you know, ways to get around, access, how to get around West Annapolis. We are looking at parks and open space, and we are looking at buildings and land use. So these are the three primary areas. Eric mentioned up front that this is part of the comprehensive plan. At the comprehensive plan level, it's very much policy oriented. We are not coming up with regulations or zoning. There may be recommendations for those elements, but this is strictly to set goals and strategies to achieve what it is that you want to see in your community. So there's 5 key characteristics I think we should keep in mind, or that are important to keep in mind as you're planning for your neighborhood to create a complete neighborhood. One is walkability. David talked about that a little bit. Connectivity, that's being able to connect to things, whether it's walking, biking, driving, having access to things in your neighborhood. Multi-layered public realm, and that's providing a range of parks, open spaces, places for people in the neighborhood to enjoy. A diverse mix of choices, and that refers to activities throughout the study area that could help either build upon the authenticity that David mentioned, or provide choices for you for things to do in your neighborhood. And then finally, authenticity again, I can't repeat that enough. West Annapolis is very much an authentic neighborhood that we want to maintain. And again, what you say will, your recommendations will definitely feed into what we grow here as a overall master planning process. So first of all, I'm just going to touch on streets and circulation real quick. The 2 key things I mentioned are walkability and connectivity. As we look at building walkability and connectivity, you know, having been in West Annapolis a number of times now, and I have a series of maps to go over in a little bit, you know, you could generally say you have a good set of streets, a good grid of streets that provides you access to and through the space. You know, one of the things we may look at is where sidewalk connections are missing. Are the sidewalks wide enough? Are there bike lanes potentially? the connectivity feeds into that. So can you connect to the things that you want to enjoy in your neighborhood is kind of the overall message. Typically when development occurs, you know, someone in the chat had mentioned that it's, or I believe Alex, you mentioned that, you know, the market forces themselves are building to what the zoning is in the area. And is that what you want to see in your neighborhood? Typically, it's an incremental process. Things that come in, you know, you see one building built and then the next building built, and you build upon that. This is just an example we use from, this is from a mall area that we had worked on, where it was very prototypically auto-oriented, not walkable. There weren't many connections. But as an area grows, as an incremental, you know, maybe in West Annapolis, this is one building or two buildings. But as things grow, you have the opportunity to start to create connectivity and ways to access your community. Now, this is a map of West Annapolis, and I want to highlight two things in this, and this is from our observations. The gray outlines are buildings that exist. You can see the streets, and the orange represents the sidewalks. So you can see where there may be some missing or substandard connections throughout the community. And then the bikeway, we only have one bike lane or bikeway now, and that runs down Melvin Street to the school and terminates there. So looking at a map like this, you can kind of start to see where some of these missing pieces may be and where you have opportunities to enhance the connectivity and the walkability in the community. This is one area we'll focus on and try to provide very solid recommendations based on what you tell us. Here's just some current conditions. You can see narrow sidewalks, but people are starting to potentially take over parking spaces to provide outdoor seating. Obviously, that plays into the pandemic and what is happening as far as being able to congregate. There's other instances where you don't even have handicapped accessibility down certain sidewalks. And then there's also instances where you see a bench here where that typically would be within a streetscape of a sidewalk. So this image on the right, you know, screams to me that there's potentially the need here for wider sidewalks that would accommodate a range of, and the ability to be able to not only walk, but rest while you're walking or hang out and watch, observe. Related to bikeability, this is the one bike lane down Melvin Street. There are, you know, remnants of bike racks and things around the area. I haven't seen them used personally, but they're there, signaling that, you know, there's a desire for this to happen. But how do we look at tying everything together closely so that there is good connectivity throughout the neighborhood? Parks and open space. This is just a real quick graphic to represent, as you're in your community, you know, I look at West Annapolis, particularly in the commercial area, you don't see parks, if any, at all. And I'll show a map here in a second. But this just speaks to a multi-layered public realm. As you're walking down a street in a neighborhood, are there multiple opportunities for different, you know, here you see a town square followed by a linear dog park, followed by a more passive trail system. So is there those range of opportunities in the neighborhood? And is that something that you want to see in the neighborhood? Multifunctional public realm. This is near me. This is, and by no means does this speak to density, but it does speak to the quantity of activities that you can fit into one acre park. If you look at Reston Town Square Park, there are, at any given time when the weather's nice out, dozens and dozens of people being able to hang out in different areas. You know, you may have children playing, you know, throwing the ball on the lawn or running through a splash fountain, but there may be more contemplative areas where people can rest and just observe. So when you do have one park or open space, are there multiple functions that can occur in that? I think that's an important element to remember. And this is a map from West Annapolis for the parks and open space. In most of our maps, we try to keep a 5-minute walk from the center of the neighborhood, which you can see is this first ring, and that second ring is a 10-minute walk. David mentioned earlier, rarely will people walk more than 5 minutes unless they have things to walk by or there's a compelling destination to get to. But when we look at the open spaces here, if you can see my cursor, there's the street end park, and we know that what that's like. If you've seen that area, it's just kind of a vestige of where a street was, but it's been turned into something. And the only other park that shows up on within the study area or close to it, and it's not necessarily something you can go and participate in, but it's the boat launch that pulls up in the mapping for the city. So what this map tells me is, and I would love to hear this from you when we do our polling, but is there a park or an open space that you can feasibly walk to and enjoy as a resident of West Annapolis? Important question to keep in mind. And then finally, buildings and land use. The current zoning here, I mentioned we're not doing zoning, but I do want to show what the zoning is to give you an idea of what could happen in this business area. So again, we're looking at this kind of the 6-block area with Annapolis Street as kind of the main street supporting it. The corner here is community shopping, and Annapolis Street is convenience shopping. So these are kind of your retail areas. And I will say right now that a couple things that you can't get in the neighborhood per the zoning in the professional office area and the professional mixed office area. The zoning won't allow, to a large degree, ice cream stores, liquor stores, wine bars, fast food, things like that. There is one district in here that does allow drive-throughs. So are those things you want to maybe exclude from, or maybe include? Do you want to drive-through in your community, or do you want to, as you move forward with policies and regulation to support that, do you actually want an ice cream store or be able to go have a glass of wine at a wine bar? These are things to think about. And then the diverse mix of choices. This is, I wouldn't say this is analogous, obviously, to West Annapolis, but what it does do is speaks to Rockville Town Square having a very open and inviting public space in the middle that people frequent, but it's also adjacent to a library, a cultural resource that is very important, and also close to availability of parking if people choose to drive to this area. But in all instances in Rockville, there is a main street that provides diverse choices of cultural assets as well as retail assets. And then finally, authenticity. And when I go to West Annapolis, the one thing I think that screams authenticity, that I see screams authenticity to me, is Annapolis Street. And what does this neighborhood want the future of that to be? I think it's where you set up for festivals. It's where you can close the street down and celebrate as a community, as a neighborhood, and in a way claim that space as yours in your authentic West Annapolis. And this is just a quick existing character map, and this covers that study area that we were talking about roughly that we're looking at. It's kind of the retail area. These are existing conditions, by the way, existing character. It's this retail center here. It's your professional office and some residential in this area. And then I kind of look at Annapolis Street as your main street where you stroll and either go to a restaurant or a unique shop. So, to what degree is this existing character important to you, and do you want to maintain these pieces? So that's just a high level of the kind of things we'll look at as we complete our study and our input. But these are the things as we go forward over the next couple months that we're going to engage you with and re-engage you with, and hopefully get your input to help shape what it is that we do recommend to the city.
I'm sorry. Can I just ask a very high level question? My name is David Williams, and I am the principal of MRE, who's actually doing some development on Annapolis Street and the Revival retail store and whatnot. I'd be interested in hearing from David and also from you. I mean, what you're painting is this wonderful picture with parks and bike lanes and a vibrant, walkable urban village, which I think I live in West Annapolis and I work in West Annapolis, and I would love nothing more than that, which is my interest. But why do you think West Annapolis is not that today?
I guess one thing I think of is in something I've heard early on is,
I don't mean developed in a commercial sense. I mean developed in a sense of the kinds of opportunities that you're describing.
Can you be more specific? One map I showed in particular was that there are no parks, for example, in West Annapolis. Is that? And I'm not saying that West Annapolis isn't like you want it to be. And Eric, should we let the Q&A begin? By the way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to spend a few minutes on Q&A. And actually, I was scanning the chat box, so I have a sense of just the types of questions that people are asking. But we can address David's question right now.
Sure. So David, you're wondering why West Annapolis is not those things, or?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. Meaning, candidly, when I look down, if you look down Annapolis Street as you're describing it, anytime after 5 p.m. on any night of the week, there's 100 open parking spaces. There's nobody there. So it's not the vibrant village center that you're describing that I think many of us as residents would really appreciate. And I'm just curious, honestly, on what your perspective is, over the last decade or so, you're giving us these great examples of things that have developed that way. Why do you think West Annapolis has not developed that way?
Okay, I understand your question a little better now. David, I'm going to let you answer that, but I think part of that, and I'm going to preface David's answer, is critical mass. And I think that's where you would maybe go with it. You're on mute, by the way, David.
Okay, thanks. Okay. I have to say, I've been scanning the chat box and certainly gotten the spirit of many of the comments here. And it is clear that there are a lot of folks who love Weston. Oh. Can you hear me? I just got knocked off.
You're on.
Yep. You're not knocking off. We hear you, David. Go ahead. Yes.
I'm back. Okay. Okay, thanks. So there are many folks who clearly love, as they should, West Annapolis very much as it is. I think we're not trying so much paint a picture a picture of a place as it should be, but a picture of the opportunities that places like West Annapolis have should people want them. It takes, Jason really came back to it, and I'll come back to it again. I see a parking lot right in the foreground of the aerial in front of me here. Over time, we're not going to need we're going to need less of that for parking. We will be able to, good folks of West Annapolis, folks like you, to develop that into many things for which there wasn't a market for most of the last 40 years, let's say, the last 10, 20 more, or 10 years more so. And it is the more folks that live near Annapolis Street, the more activity it's going to have, the more retail it will support, and the more amenity it will support, and over a longer period of time. Is this getting at your question?
I mean, at some level, yes, but I mean, in some ways, there's a commercial opportunity here. And I mean, certainly I think there's residents. I mean, I love West Annapolis. I love the neighborhood. I love the residential. Sure. I love the school, so on and so forth. But I'm just sort of I'm curious. We talk a little bit about, and I've been through these processes before, which is we talk a little bit about the opportunity, but without, a proper sort of private-public partnership here, because it's going to take commercial investment, which is going to happen in the private sector. Yeah. And it's also going to take, I mean, to your point of that parking lot, unless it was zoned differently, there's nothing anybody can do.
Absolutely.
And some material issues like traffic on the weekends with the Bay Bridge backup. There's issues around zoning as it relates to parking. I mean, there's some real fundamental issues of why there isn't a better and stronger restaurant scene in West Annapolis, which my friend at Flamont here, I'm sure, would be happy to expand upon. So it's those kinds of things that I feel like we're just not bringing up. We're bringing up all the rosy things that could be park, but where are we going to build a park, and who's going to pay for it, and so on and so forth.
I got it. Exactly. Okay. So first of all, we apologize for being, it looks like we've been rosy to some and not so rosy to others. But one of the things that Jason and I and Jess are going to do is look at what the opportunities are in terms of new uses. And we're going to look at the economics of those opportunities. And I can't tell you tonight that you're going to need a public or should have a public-private partnership. But boy, if that's what it's going to take to unlock things people want, we're going to come back and tell you, and we're also going to tell you if it is and why it would be a good public investment. Is that fair?
Yes, I think that's fair. And I also recognize that, look, not everybody wants the same thing. So I'm not projecting onto the community that what you just presented.
One thing I want to emphasize, if people can hear me, that Jason said, and it's a phrase I love to use, is that we're talking about, and I really appreciate somebody pointing out because I did not mention it right at the start, a fairly circumscribed area. We're talking about changes here that are going to be things people want to be able to walk to, but not have next door to them in many cases. This is very much about not changing a blade of grass on anybody's wonderful front lawn nearby, but it is a choice around what this core of West Annapolis should be going forward that folks will have going forward. And I do promise and commit that we're going to make these choices very real by saying what it takes to achieve them. Is that fair? Whether it's zoning or public-private partnership or none of the above.
Dave, I think we need to get a little bit further into the questions and the polling. If Eric,
Sure.
if you want to moderate any high level, or do you want to keep moving?
We need to get to the polling in just a minute. There was just one type of question I thought would be helpful. What's wrong with piecemeal development? I think I heard that a few times from folks that it seems to be working fine in this area right now. So could you guys speak to that? I mean,
Jason, I'd be glad to, but do you want to jump in?
I like to talk to that. I like to speak to that.
Well, hold on, sir.
I'll spend 30 seconds.
We
used to be in West Annapolis for 20 years. We moved to parole for 5 years. We've seen the difference between a re-engineered space feels like, and then we moved back to West Annapolis. So we have the experience before, after, and after. And I tell you, if there's any idea of creating anything close to parole here, because I'm hearing, a lot about economics and so on, and it's going to be so great. There'll be more people. We're going to get some parking so more people can come, and so on. This is parole. This is parole. Maybe not on steroid, but this is parole again.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Eric.
Jason, David, anything else you'd like to add before we get into the?
I will add that I think piecemeal development, if it means human scale, if it means a variety of folks creating it, if it means being created over time, is just great. Where piecemeal is done best is when it is guided by common concepts, that it enlivens streets, that wherever possible you have folks living over the store so that there are folks that will come downstairs and shop and keep that store alive. If it means creating some new public spaces in addition to development. So I think if I, and I suspect I do, I understand that when piecemeal was used earlier, it was in the sense of not coordinated. And maybe there's a particular word that West Annapolis can use, which is curated, which is getting sort of the rules of the game in place, because you have some real choices and you can choose what comes here. And certainly one thing I suspect none of you would choose is big mega scale development, but I suspect a lot of you would choose development that together makes Annapolis Street still more walkable, gives you more of the things that you need that enhance your lives. Is that a fair answer?
Mm-hmm.
And you're in a position to do that.
Yep. Folks, we're going to just jump into the last part of this event, which is this polling, which, we had issues last time. We're gonna do it the same way. And we're just going to ask that if you have any issues, since we really only have 10 minutes left, we're just going to make sure to check out the website, which I'll post again in the chat.
Eric.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, we're going to capture all of these questions and comments we're getting in the meeting chat, and we will not leave them behind. We will put together answers to these, and those will be posted to the website. Please don't think that if we're not answering your question this evening that we won't get to you. It's very important that we do get to you, I think. So, and again, the polling stuff will also be available. So what I'm going to do is, again, pull up the polling, and I'm going to put one question at a time. And we're going to start, let's start with the housing question. And David, if while I'm putting this up, if you want to just say a few words while people are, it's really to gauge, what type of home you live in and where you live now. I saw a comment earlier. This is not empirical survey or polling. What it is to give us a sense of kind of the sentiment of the neighborhood. So we are not going for statistical accuracy here, but rather kind of what is happening in and around the neighborhood. So I went ahead and posted the link. I'm going to show you mine. It should be up there now, Rebecca, if you see it.
Yeah.
Thumbs up. If you, again, I'm going to put my screen up. Do not, if you click on this now, what you see on mine, it won't work. But if you go to the meeting chat box, this is that link you need to click on to take the poll. And I can show the live responses as they come in. Give you about 30 more seconds. Take another 10 seconds if you would wrap up your polls, please.
Looks like we have about 30 responses or so.
30, 33.
Yeah, same problem.
You're having the same problem, Fred?
Yeah, absolutely.
I would love to talk to you offline, and I want to take care of this. I think I'm not sure what's going on. I apologize for that. Okay, let's look at this real quick. If you're finishing up, go ahead and finish it up. It looks like everybody but one person who completed the poll lives in a single-family detached home, which is what I would anticipate in this area. A high percentage of that would like to continue living in a single-family home as their next location. Everybody but one person owns their home. Most people are very likely to remain where you live now. And then aging in place. David, do you want to just say a few words about aging in place and the whole concept behind that?
Yeah, although it sounds like most of you feel you'll have the ability, but obviously as we all get older, our housing needs and preferences may change, probably do at some point. And one of the things that we really care about is making sure that folks who want to stay in their neighborhood as their housing needs change can. And that can mean a wider array of housing choices. Looks like a lot of folks here have a sense that they're going to be able to, and it doesn't seem to be a major concern here. But it's something we'll return to during the process.
Yep, absolutely. All right, let's do retail and shopping questions.
Okay, and I want to make one comment here. Is it Mary Beth, whom it's very frustrating not to be able to actually meet any of you, as Jason said, but said common concepts may not be authentic compared to mom and pop and small businesses, and I want to underline and put that in bold italics. Mom and pops, locally owned and operated businesses can be some of the best expressions of the character and quality and creativity and specialness of a neighborhood. Yeah. And we certainly want to really foster those opportunities.
All right. So I've put the next link if you want to click on that and take this poll on retail and shopping. Just 4 quick questions here. And let's see if we get some live results when people start finishing that. And I would it's really, I love the fact that we're able to see each other's comments in the chat. You know, one of the things I miss, and, you know, I apologize for any hiccups we have this evening. Obviously, with the pandemic, we are challenged. Typically, we would have this in a very open and inviting format, a workshop, typically at a school or community center, and have those interactions and be able to have the contextual conversations. It's really difficult to do that over the computer, especially when we have technology issues and working in new formats. So apologize for any hiccups, but as we move forward, I think this is only going to get it to be a better process as we gather your input. We have 20 responses, just about.
And folks, I'd like to just say, you know, if you can stay on and finish the poll, please do. I know we said this meeting would end at 8:30. I'd like to at least finish the polling questions. I know this conversation could go on, for a long time, but feel free to add any other thoughts in the meeting chat box before you do sign off, and we'll make sure to account for that.
Yeah, I think we can wrap up the polling questions within 10 minutes here.
Yeah.
Shouldn't be a problem. Looks like everybody's starting to get the hang of it. All right, let's start looking at these. We got 35 responses approximately again. So do you shop in West Annapolis for your daily needs? So over half of you do. And by daily needs, we mean your neighborhood services such as pharmacy, groceries, restaurants, perhaps. We have 36. Where do you prefer to shop? West Annapolis Shopping Center. I think it's officially called West Annapolis 2, but we'll call it West Annapolis Shopping Center. Has Grawls in there and a handful of stores. Not many people outside of West Annapolis, but a handful. Good. I think it's nice to see that people are using the local business. What types of business would you like to see more of? This is very important for us to see and understand. Restaurants obviously tops the chart. I think that's great. Daily services such as barbers, banking, a few others, bars, that typically comes in pretty high. And then how important is it that you continue to have a grocer in the neighborhood? And most of you say extremely important. We're not recommending, nor will our recommendations show that anybody has to move. Any development in the future is going to be motivated by a property owner. So, okay, thank you for that. We're starting to get some momentum here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and post let's do the parks and open space one next. So I'll go ahead and place this link into the chat box again. If you would click on it here in a second, and it's there. Let's try to get this one done in a minute. All right. Let's see. This one's a little longer. Has some open-ended questions. Starting to get some responses in. I think it's fascinating to see how these pie charts change as the responses come in. $14. $22. Let's give it another minute and we should be able to wrap up on this one. I'm trying not to hurry people. I think this is important. Okay, we're hitting 30 again. Few more people wrapping up. Okay. All right, we can start going through these. Parks and open space in and around West Annapolis satisfies my needs for open space. Quite a range here, all the way from, well, the not true at all versus extremely true or about tied. I think that's kind of interesting. Do you go elsewhere? Most of you say yes. From what I can gather, there's not a lot of open space or parks to access. What types of open space would you like to see in West Annapolis? Plaza near retail, green lawn for play, parklets. Those are the small neighborhood parks. Actually, a pretty good representation all the way across. What other types would you like to see? Let's pull these and see what kind of input we're getting. Connect to a bike trail, tennis courts, boat launch park, dog friendly, dog park, water access. Themes will start to develop out of this. If adequate parks and open space was available, which of the following programs we'd like to support? Farmers market, coming in high, music and cultural events, and family events coming in high. So, when we look at these results, these types of activities need a certain structure to support them. So, obviously a farmer's market you can do on Annapolis Street, but to host music events or family events, you may need more of a lawn to do that. So these start to inform what types of recommendations we may be providing.
And Jason, I just want to observe that one of the things that I'm taking from this is that things that help people sort of celebrate their sense of community are scoring very well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and then real quick, let's look at what other types of programmed events people are throwing. Cultural, music, sports, swimming pool, bike race, street fair, movies, lectures, parade. All right, thank you. We got 40 responses on that one. Great. And then our last one is on transportation and mobility. I'm going to grab this link and put it into the chat box. And you should see it there now. Actually, there we go. Okay. Questions we have on mobility is about access and that connectivity that David and I talked about. Walking, sidewalks, bike lanes, parking is an item. One thing I've observed in West Annapolis is you have your office buildings on stilts with parking underneath, and things like that are very much a function of what the parking requirements are in zoning to a large degree. To be able to accommodate the current regulations, the only place to put it in some instances is under the building. So should our parking regulations something we should look at? Someone mentioned you go down Annapolis Street and there's vacant parking, there's parking available after 5 o'clock all along it. So is there enough parking here? Is there too much parking here to where those spaces can be used for other things and other development?
And I will tell you, typically you get a lot more rent for an office building today if there's a cool place to get coffee on the ground floor as opposed to a parking space.
Or beer.
Or beer, yes.
All right, we got 20 some coming in. All right, we're over 30 again. Okay, let's start to interpret these results. So how do people in West Annapolis or people on the pole access businesses? Pretty even split between driving and walking. A few on bike and a few others. Can you access daily needs within walking distance? Most people, 2/3 of the people say yes. It's interesting in that, certainly you look at West Annapolis and the single family neighborhoods, and there's a lot of homes in Wardour, and there's a lot of homes much closer as you go further away. It doesn't become as feasible to walk necessarily. Do you feel that West Annapolis has adequate sidewalks? Pretty even split on that. Adequate bike lanes, pretty even split on that. Actually, in the inverse from the sidewalks. Adequate parking, most people are saying yes, a few say no. I saw one comment in the chat box about the office users parking on the street and taking up available parking. And then unsafe intersections. This is something we really want to look at. We want your neighborhood to be as safe as possible when you are getting multiple modes of people moving about, walking, biking, driving. And most people feel that there are unsafe in some conflict areas. So let's open that up and see what's coming up and kind of intersection, Annapolis and Taylor, Melvin and Annapolis. So we'll start to see some trends emerging from this. So we'll look at this pretty closely to see what that is. But furthermore, it will be interesting to look at and see what it is that makes them unsafe. What is it, a perception? Are there actual physical improvements that can be made to those intersections? We want to make walking and biking as safe as possible if it is an alternative mode of transportation. All right. So that wraps up our polling. And if we look at our agenda, Eric,
we are out of time.
We're not too far behind, but
no, we're not. I think we had hoped to have more time for Q&A, but I'm in the process of posting our project website again, and I'm seeing a lot of comments in the meeting chat that we'll be able to address after this. I think there's some definite themes here to what people are interested in addressing. So, we'll go ahead and do that. I think this was a good experiment in seeing how the platform works. And we had some hiccups here. Thanks for bearing with us as we figured it out. We have another workshop for this master plan in October, and we're going to be thinking about the format for that. So, Jason, David, do you have any other thoughts?
Well, I just want to, one takeaway from this, and as I mentioned, this is, we're all kind of using new formats and learning the technology. And one thing I miss, not being able to be in person and talk to everybody is having those conversations. The whole time I'm presenting, I want to watch the meeting chat, because I think that's so interesting to hear what people have to say.
Yeah.
So, one of my takeaways is next time we come back together, let's have the opportunity to hear and be heard, and let people speak up. I want to hear what people have to say. So, the meeting chat for this format, I think worked okay, but I think we can certainly improve on that and provide a better experience next time.
So I'll just echo everything Jason said, and then he's going to bawl me out after we get off, because I'm also going to say the more communication we can have with all of you, not easy these days, but boy, does it matter. And frankly, about the least expensive, time-consuming, high-value thing we can do is get on the phone with folks for group calls or do more of this, because we want to hear from you. We also, in some cases, want to respond with the knowledge that we bring and ask you to think about it. So, both of those just take time together, and that's a struggle today, but we're determined to make this work. And I just really appreciate it. Like Jason, I was following it's almost hard to present because I was following the chat box the whole time. And we'll respond to every comment here. So thank you very much.
If I could ask a question, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Eric Lashinsky, what is the most direct, clear, and easy way to communicate with you and this team? How would you suggest doing it?
Gosh, no. So, well, you can definitely email me. There's no problem there. I think my interest, always is in making questions more visible to larger population, when they have some relevance to what we're doing here. I think if you have specific questions about this process and the plan we're working on, you can find my email and contact info on the Planning and Zoning website. We are going to have, additional kind of targeted engagement opportunities on this in the larger comprehensive plan in the weeks ahead. So, hopefully we'll address people's specific questions through those. But, we're going to, within this West Annapolis master plan, like I said, we have another workshop coming up in October, which is going to be here before we know it. And so I would love for folks to, come get the same kind of turnout to that. But in the meantime, just email me and I'll figure out a way to answer questions, and we'll probably find some functionality on our West Annapolis website to make all of this kind of transparent and see if we can keep it coming.
Well, I would only like one comment. There's been a lot of focus on Annapolis Street, but I think what people are missing is that there's a lot other area, Ridgely Avenue and Melvin Avenue and all up in there. That's really where there could be a lot of changes, far removed from the single families, but a tremendous number of opportunities shall we say, south or whatever, towards Route Boulevard.
Mm-hmm.
Good point. Thank you.
Agreed. Yeah. Yeah. I think in some ways, I would say Annapolis is a kind of concrete place in a way. It has destinations. I think the area you're describing, Bob, in some ways, I think is still looking for some identity, and but that's part of what I think why people gravitate towards that discussing Annapolis.
And there's going to be an awful lot of synergy between what happens on those blocks and the level of activity along Annapolis in 5 years.
Right.
So.
All right.
Well, thank you everyone again. Thank you to our planning consultants from Stan Tech, David and Jason and Jess, and again, we really look forward to people staying involved in this process, and we're going to find ways to improve how we do that. And
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But thank you for hanging in there, and Eric, thanks for the opportunity to present, and we look forward to the next time. Let's keep this momentum going. I think this is great. Good start.
Yeah. Thanks everyone.
Thank you all very much.